President Donald Trump has ordered the U.S. to impose tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese imports, and China has said it will retaliate in kind. The escalation in trade conflict between the two biggest economies of the world has roiled financial markets worldwide. Has the U.S. drawn a line between itself and the rest of the world? Can the situation be pulled back from the brink? And if not, what will be the damage for currencies, stock markets, and the global trade of commodities? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined by Li Daokui, Director of the Center for China in the World Economy at Tsinghua University. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue, Professor Li. Now that the trade war has broken out between the United States and China, what do you make of the immediate response from the Chinese authorities?
The immediate response, of course, is the tit for tat. We have to respond in kind because this is a starting of a new dynamism. The Chinese side has to make sure the dynamism is in favor of China, in China's favor, so that China has to respond. There's no choice, no alternatives.
But what about the general response from the general public about the standoff? There are some different sentiments shared by liberals and conservatives, by those who are pro-U.S. and those who would die hard to defend our national stakes. So what do you think of the different voices?
Yes, it's a wonderful question. The Chinese society is as diverse as the U.S. society, actually. The Chinese society is full of very diverse voices. On one extreme, the view is that this is good for China. The U.S. is helping China. Finally, China is facing pressure to do reforms, and all the policy reforms which have been delayed will be sped up. This is one extreme. The other side is that China is being bullied by the U.S. China has to be tough. So they are both sides. But I think, on my observation, is that the policymakers are very cool-minded. They are very pragmatic. They are trying to negotiate with the U.S. by responding in kind. In other words, to try to negotiate, meanwhile try to fighting in the battlefield.
But what are the basic considerations behind the sophistication and calm manner of the Chinese decision makers? When you say they are calm, they know everything, they know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I think fundamentally, and which is the point that most media analysts have neglected, the Chinese leaders are actually positioned to be leaders of the new round of globalization. The Chinese side says we will keep on our commitment, keep on our path of opening up. No matter what happens in the U.S. or EU, we will push for new changes in globalization, right? As being said, has been articulated by President Xi Jinping at Boao and at Davos. And meanwhile, on the technical side, right? On the technical side, the Chinese policymakers are negotiating very pragmatically with the U.S.
From the opening speech at the Boao Forum for Asia to the latest release of yet another policy paper on the WTO, the Chinese authorities made it very clear, as you said wisely, we would continue to open up on the special occasion of the 40th anniversary of China's opening up. You believe it or not, China will go ahead in the right direction. However, what will be the most difficult areas where reforms might be difficult to be carried out in the deep water, regards?
Yeah, well, the difficulties come from industries and certain enterprises which are facing pressure if China further opens up. For example, the automobile industry. The automobile industry, believe me, was the single most important obstacle in the last round of negotiation of WTO. Why is that? Very simple. At that time, 17 or 18 years ago, many key decision makers had working experiences in the auto industry. You name it. I wouldn't give you names. You know what I mean. The top policymaker had connection with the auto industry, but that things cannot be said today. Today, the top policymakers in China have consolidated his decision power. So I think he's able to push for a new round of reforms. No industries like automobile industry will be able to be preventing.
The prevention of systematic financial risks proved to be one of the three pillars or major challenges that the Chinese authorities want to overcome to make sure that nothing would go wrong. And yet, with the trade standoff breaking out, what's the likelihood for the Chinese to open up its capital account? Because President Xi Jinping made it very clear that we're going to eliminate equity caps or ceilings for overseas investment in the financial sector and the insurance segments of the Chinese economy. Do you think we are ready? Back in the year 2001, when China was first admitted to the WTO, many complained or voiced their grave concern that China was not ready yet. But what happened was just the opposite. That the entry into the WTO did help China get deeply integrated with the world as an indispensable part of the globalization.
Actually, there are two sides of the issue. On financial services, when we talk about actual companies like insurance companies, investment banks, China is fully ready. I cannot overemphasize this anymore. China is completely open, completely ready to completely open up its financial services, investment banks, insurance, because the local companies have already learned how to manage risks. The local companies have already learned how to serve the needs of the clients, of customers, very well. Foreign companies have to learn, in many cases in China, in how to serve better local clients. However, the other side of the issue is capital account convertibility, totally different. Capital account convertibility says that a company can freely move capital across border. This financial service opening up says that you can move in your capital, but stay here. Stay here, operate as a company. These two things are separated. So I believe in the financial service side, China will very quickly be completely open to the outside world. But in the capital account, will be very gradual.
What do you think of the impact of the tax reform by the Trump administration with the ongoing flow of capital back to the United States? Do you think we'll have a severe adversity of foreign direct investment in China? And that's also a common problem for emerging markets.
I'm very happy you asked this question, right? The Trump's tax reforms, its impact on China is grossly overemphasized, overly analyzed and emphasized in China. The impact is exaggerated in China. Why? Because if you look at the details of the Trump administration's tax reform are that the bulk of the tax cut is on the personal income side, which will boost the U.S. economy in the short run on the consumption side. That's why the U.S. economy is running on hormones, on stimulus right now, right? Like an athlete, it's on drug. Meanwhile, the tax cuts of President Trump on the enterprise actually are very minimal, only about $500 billion US dollar. How large is $500 billion US dollar? It's less than the total budget deficit of the federal government. Minimum. Meanwhile, don't forget, U.S. corporates are not in shortage of cash. They have about $2 trillion US dollar amount of cash in their bank account.
Is that because of the quantitative easing?
Correct. That's because quantitative easing, and because corporates have been doing very well profit-wise over the past few years, and the U.S. domestic economy so far has not shown good enough prospects for U.S. companies to make local investments. Cash is not the bottleneck, the tax reform on the enterprise in the U.S. is only giving more cash to U.S. corporates. So I do not think companies will leave China and move back to the U.S. because of tax reform in the U.S. Yes, the tax reform is helping the U.S. economy right now, which will actually increase U.S. trade deficit, okay, assuming no trade wars. And meanwhile, in the long run, the tax cuts of the Trump administration will be worsening the U.S. federal budget, which will spell bigger problem for the U.S. The U.S. economy does not need tax cuts. Let me say this in a provocative way. The U.S. economy needs tax hikes. The U.S. economy needs tax hikes and use the increased tax revenue to help those segments of the U.S. society which have been hurt by globalization. They should be trained, they should be educated. That's the direction. So Trump is doing the wrong way, is worsening the problem in the long run.
That's a very severe criticism. Now, tax and cash aside, Professor Li, what do you think of the bullish and dynamic stock market at this moment? The
U.S. Stock market is still running very well, okay?
And in sharp contrast is the sharp decline in our stock market.
Sure.
The bearish one.
Certainly. Okay, let's do it one by one. Okay, the U.S. economy is again running on stimulus, running on drugs. I strongly believe it's overpriced. When I talk to people in the Wall Street, they all tell me, yes, we know. We know the stock market needs adjustments, downward adjustments, right? Doesn't mean a crisis. However, individually, I cannot, the Wall Street people, I cannot go short. I cannot short the U.S. stock market. I dare not, because other people may disagree, right? People often say, in the stock market, a smart person will lose money, right? Foolish people make money. You have to follow the foolish people's decision in order to make. This is a theory. This is a theory by Larry Summers.
Thank you very much. You suggest that I should go to the stock market because I'm stupid, right?
Well, no. The key thing is you have to be smart enough to read the minds of the foolish people. We call herd behavior. This is a story. This is a famous paper by Larry Summers and his colleagues. Harvard professor, right? Former president of Harvard and the Treasury Secretary of the U.S., right? Meanwhile, let's come back to the Chinese stock market. Chinese stock market now is low, not only because of the trade war. The main problem is because of our financial policy in the past 6 months. Our policy of deleverage was not properly executed.
Are you suggesting that the Chinese authorities are reconsidering the deleveraging policy?
Reconsidering the execution of the policy. The current policy, let me use a metaphor, is like to cure the problem of a cancer patient, a patient with cancerous cells, by not eating, by cutting on your diet. So our financial policy in the past 6 months is cutting down as much as 15% of social capital financing. 15, okay, right? Hoping that this cutting down of diet will starve the cancerous cells, the non-performing debt. But actually, the contrary is happening. That good cells are being hurt. The lousy, the cancerous cells are more powerful. They are still getting nutrition, right? So what should be done is to increase the total amount of financing to the whole economy. Meanwhile, do targeted operations on non-performing debt. Restructure one by one. Set up good examples. I call upon the government to set up 10 or 20, maybe 50 leading cases of non-performing debt restructuring. You know, in China, our problem in China is now too many documents, not enough cases, too many policies, not enough cases. We want to see cases, like interviews, right? If you read a document, the audience wouldn't appreciate. But if you bring me, giving you, having got this conversation, I'm a case. I can tell people what's going on. Or even better, you show some pictures, right?
I'm so glad that you base much of your analysis on case study, but you're watching Dialogue with Professor Li Daokui, a renowned economist from Tsinghua University. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back, Professor Li. Now, let's go back to Wisconsin, the Midwest state, where President Trump enjoyed much of the support during the campaign. On the campaign trail, he said, I'm going to do enough to honor your support. So we see a mixed picture in that state. On the one hand, Mr. Guo Taiming, the business tycoon from Taiwan, attended the opening ceremony or ribbon-cutting ceremony with President Trump in laying the groundwork for the establishment of a major factory to create jobs. On the other hand, we see the threat by Harley-Davidson to withdraw from Wisconsin. What do you make of the mixed signals that we receive from the power base of the electorate? I mean, the electorate base of President Trump's.
This is a wonderful, wonderful case. Wonderful, wonderful case. Okay, to me, the most important message is not about Harley-Davidson. It's not about the Foxconn, right? Rather, it's about what is the key focus of President Trump. President Trump's key focus is on jobs, blue-collar workers' jobs. It's not about China, made in China 2025. It's not about intellectual property rights. That's all excuses.
The jobs are for the deplorables.
Jobs for the U.S. Yes, exactly. Jobs in the Midwest, in the heartland of the U.S. That is #1 priority. This is not the priority of people like Leibheiser. So we see two Americas, two U.S. actually, right? One is represented by President Trump. The other one is Leibheiser, the elites. The elites are trying to stop China. Stop China. China is a big threat, right? President Trump is only focusing on the jobs, right? This is the most important message. So in this regard, I do believe that after midterm election, the two sides will work out something. The Chinese government will tell President Trump, yes, I understand your pain. Not only Wisconsin, but Detroit. Don't forget about Detroit. By the way, I worked near Detroit for 7 years in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I knew very well the problem of Detroit. Detroit's need jobs. Cities like Detroit, they need jobs.
Now Detroit has become a ghost city.
We can help. China can help revive Detroit. We can help Detroit. We give more than President Trump asks. But leave us alone. Don't talk about made in China 2025. That's our lifeline. China needs to make progress. China needs to upgrade our industry scale, right? Nobody can stop China. Nobody should stop China in doing that.
That's non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. We are a middle-income country. We want to become a high-income country. The only way to do it is to upgrade our industry. So this is the cooperation point. President Trump and China, we can cooperate on this issue.
But I'm afraid the presidency of Donald Trump is not only driven very much by his own ego, but also the bipartisan consensus that China needs to be given a warning. If not, China needs to be bashed. Because after years of reassessment about the policy of engagement since perhaps Richard Nixon in the early 1970s, the United States expected China to be transformed into one of the democratic countries, or one of them on the Western camp. It turned out that China will work its own way to navigate its own course of development, very different from Western institutions. They have been left disillusioned. Therefore, when you say after the mid-elections that we're going to work out something, perhaps you are a little bit too confident.
Well,
and optimistic.
Again, wonderful, wonderful question. Thank you for asking that. There are two U.S. actually. We, our Chinese, we have been dealing with the elite U.S. The U.S. which have been running the country in the past 70 years after World War II. They are Dr. Kissinger's. They are Hank Paulson's, right? They are the Fed chairmans. This elite U.S. is following the belief the U.S. is the beacon of the freedom of the free world. The U.S. should set up a world order, global order. The U.S. is helping the whole world. This U.S. is now giving away to a large extent to the other U.S.
By the way, President Obama even said that the United States is ready to lead the world for another century.
Exactly. That's elite America. That's the America we are very, very familiar with. We have been dealing with them for many, many years, including the executives of top multinationals. The other U.S. now have waken up, led by President Trump. The other America is what Samuel Huntington, Professor Samuel Huntington, late professor from Harvard, in his famous book, Who We Are, the national identity of the U.S., right? In his book, he said, we are not an immigration country. We are settlers. We are people who have beliefs, right? Who have religious beliefs, Puritans. We work hard, right? We don't bother other people. We treat this land as our land. We have only two neighbors, in the north, Canada, in the south, Mexico. We don't have to deal with global affairs. We are U.S. We are ourselves. We don't welcome immigrants. This U.S. is coming up, going against.
Is making a comeback.
Elites. And this U.S. is now, frankly speaking, in the driving seat by led by President Trump. And this U.S. is now actually can work. Actually, is now being able to work with our China, because China wants more global influence. China wants to make more contribution to the world, right? Like President Trump said, Belt and Road. Well, that America is retreating. So strategically, there's good pairs. Good pairs. So the America first. The U.S. policy, right? President Trump's motto, America first, reflects the traditional America. And this traditional America is coming up. So look at the issue of immigration. Heated issue, more heated issue than trade. Okay, why the two U.S. are now tough on China? That's the only issue the two U.S. can agree upon. The only issue on gun control, on immigration, on homosexual, on the same-sex marriage. No agreements, no consensus, no fire and ice and water and ice.
Except for the alleged China threat.
Exactly. That's the only common uniting theme of the two sides.
Well, when we look at the unity, not only in the United States, we have to look at what's happening across the Atlantic Ocean. The EU and China both complain about the tariffs on steel and aluminum. Does it mean that in this new age of reglobalization, the European Union will join hands with China to promote the idea of a multilateralism instead of a protectionism or populism, which has become a hallmark of recent politics in European countries and across the Atlantic?
It's happening. It's happening now. It's happening now. China is working with the European Union. Right? European Union treats the trade issue not a trade issue, as a political issue, because the European Union is first founded as a trade union, as a free trade union.
To avert yet another war.
Exactly. Exactly. So the EU and China are born to be allies on this issue.
What do you think of the possibility that Trump will pull out of the WTO? Because he's not very happy about the multilateralism, and he talks about the victimhood of American economy. And therefore, he's going to draft a new document, a landmark document, raising the threshold of tariffs. Because he's not very happy about WTO. He says it's unfair. In effect, it's already happening. Look at that, okay? The core of the WTO is a 7-person committee. I forgot the name. The BB Committee of Arbitrators. I've got the exact technical name, right? The 7-person committee only now has 4 people, 4 committee members. Why? Because the nominees for the 3 vacant positions have been blocked by the U.S. So the WTO is now basically paralyzed by the U.S. Right now, it's happening now. It's happening now. So I do believe President Trump will, very likely, announce that formally U.S. will get out of the WTO. Let's look at the broad issue, Professor Li. With the pullout by the United States from TPP, the Climate Change Pact, the nuclear deal with Iran, you can raise a lot more other examples to illustrate the beginning of what is called new isolationism in the United States. Therefore, is China ready to assume the leadership? And what is required if China says, yeah, we are somehow ready to lead the process of a reglobalization?
I think China is ready. However, this definition of ready is different from the traditional Western definition of ready. The traditional Western definition of ready is that being a leader, right? Ready to be a leader, being very aggressive, very, very provocative, very, very forceful. China will not be that kind of leader. China is not ready to be a forceful, violent, impolite.
Using the policy of a gunboat?
Gunboat, no. China is not like that. However, China has already begun working quietly with India, right? With European Union, with North Korea, with South Korea, and eventually I think will work with Japan if the Japanese side realize the potential, right? So already China is gradually assuming leadership of a Chinese style. Which is
inclusive,
collaboration,
co-prosperity.
Co-prosperity, mutual understanding, right? Mutual respect, and then plentiful of negotiation and gradualism.
But I'm afraid Europeans and Americans share the same concern about the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, namely lack of transparency, no serious respect for rules. What do you make of their grievances?
Very key important question, okay? I'm afraid that there's a cultural misunderstanding, right? So Belt and Road is a vision. It's not just a specific set of institutions, right? It's a vision. It's a general ideal. It's ideal. It's ideal. It's meant to be improved upon. It's meant to be negotiated. It's meant to be substantiated, right? So yes, Western countries do have grievances, do have concerns about Belt and Road. Come to China. Let's talk about it. Let's negotiate. Let's improve upon this, right? So I think that's philosophically two different approaches, right? So there's a misunderstanding of this. I do believe the Belt and Road project initiative will be further negotiated, improved.
Well, of course, you might be pointing to a very important emerging concept, that is the learning curve for China's integration. But you suggest that the Europeans come to China, or Americans come to China, we give them a talk, we give them a lecture, but they say no, you come over, you join our discussion here in continental Europe, in North America, instead of the other way around. They say you don't, you are a little bit too assertive. Let me talk to you.
Sure, I understand. Money talks.
Money talks.
This country, China, and this economy has the largest amount of surplus savings.
And the biggest army of consumers.
Yes, in spite of the biggest army of consumers, still every year we save more money than we consume. We need this money to be deployed in many, many countries, and most countries welcome money. Right? In Chinese we say, you may have problems with many things, but don't have problem with money, right? So money goes out, helping other countries, right? So whereas in European countries, they do not have that large amount of surplus savings. U.S. is the other way around. U.S. is now needing our money to finance their deficits. So you tell me, who should come to whom?
Well, thank you so much. We need to conclude this very dynamic and enlightening discussion. You said politics chases money, but I would argue it's the other way around. Money chases politics.
Sure.
You may not give me a clear answer this time, but I keep the door open for the next round of discussion about what's going to happen after the trade war breaks out between Washington and Beijing. I do appreciate your participation in this meaningful dialogue on the occasion of a real war between the two economies. And I appreciate your note of optimism.
Wonderful, wonderful. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the next round of dialogue.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.